Hello and welcome to Fridays with Vistage. My name is Bill Black. I'm a Vistage member and a speaker, and I'm the host of the ExitCoach radio show, which can be heard online from your smartphone at exitcoachradio.com. I'm your moderator, and today's topic is the multi-generational workforce. Is your company keeping pace? Has your company created new policies to attract and retain a specific age range of employees? Well, today you'll learn how to attract, retain, and leverage a multi-generational workforce. You'll hear about risk management issues and pitfalls to be avoided, and possible outcomes if proper policies and procedures are not created and followed. Today's speakers are Michael Schraer, the Employment Practices Liability Insurance Manager at Chubb, the world's largest property and casualty insurance company, and Jack McCalmon, the founder of the McCalmon Group, Inc., which provides services that improve the workplace and lower an employer's risk to loss and litigation. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack McCalmon.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today. My name is Jack McCalmon. I am the presenter today, and want to first start off by, and my slides aren't moving forward, so we're see if we can get it. There we go. I want to first start by talking to you to say that I'm going to be speaking in generalizations. Most of what we do in this is speaking in wide brushes about the different generations and generalizing their characteristics. So I think we all know millennials who may act like boomers after hearing the characteristics, and I think we'll all know boomers who may act like millennials. So please take that in mind. And the other thing to remember is that there are literally hundreds of surveys on the different types and characteristics of each generation. And so it's worth doing your own research on it to understand it, because in this span of time, we really can't go into too much depth. But in kind of looking at this and speaking on this over a number of years, kind of got an idea if I had to describe a pet for each generalization. Here's my description. First, for boomers, I look at it as like a golden retriever. A great dog. You throw the ball into the water, they come back, and they bring it back to you. They want to do it again and again and again, and they never get tired of doing it. And so, great pet to have, and I'm not equivocating employees to pets, but just looking at characteristics, boomers have great characteristics for employers, but so do the other generations. So for Generation X, I look at it kind of like a bulldog. A great pet to have. Will also chase after, maybe not every time. Maybe we'll get tired of it, may want to do their own thing. Very loyal, a great pet to have in any household. Works well with other people, as does the golden retriever. And then for millennials, I have the cat. Little kitten. And that's not to disparage millennials, but millennials kind of go by their own, if you're a cat person, you know cats kind of have their own mind on things, and cats kind of go to their own, to the beat of their own drummer, and do it when they want to do it, but they're happy. They're great pets. I have 2 cats and enjoy them both, and you got to kind of know how to work with them. And so hopefully today, we'll kind of show you where they're coming from and how they look at the workplace, and then also identify some of the risks. So here's the information by the years. Baby boomers are defined as people born in the year of 1946 to 1964. Generation X is 1965 to 1979. And millennials, which are also referred to as Generation Y, is 1980 to 2000, okay? Then after millennials is Generation Z. But important in this presentation is understanding a little bit how each one has been shaped. And to understand that, you need to know the generations prior. So baby boomers were often shaped by the 2 generations before it, the silent generation, which is from 1923 to 1944, but more often the greatest generation, which was from 1910 to 1925. And the greatest generation still impacts us today, even though most from that generation, the youngest would be 95 now, or 91, sorry. So the youngest would be 91, so many have passed on. But the greatest generation still impacts all the generations going forward. Specifically, if you look at what they accomplished. In the greatest generation, they overcame the Depression. And then, of course, they fought World War II. And the greatest generation was also impacted by the lost generation, which fought in World War I, which was from 1890 to 1915. And so that greatest generation passed on a lot of things to baby boomers. And I can speak of myself. I'm right at the cusp of a baby boomer and a Generation Xer, for full disclosure. And so I can still remember everything. You know, my grandparents told me both are World War II veterans. One earned a Bronze Star, one earned a Purple Heart, wounded at the bow of the Bulge, and how they described things. Well, they're very quiet about it, but, you know, of the two events, I know that the Great Depression probably impacted them the most, and how they were about getting ahead, about education, things of that nature I know impacted me, and I know it may have impacted a lot of you who are listening right now. So looking at the population, boomers have, and just because they're getting older, have the least amount. It's 44.6 million. Generation X is 52.7 million, and millennials are at 53.5 million. So millennials now, there are more millennials than anyone else. Now, some characteristics. Now, once again, these are generalizations. First of all, boomers, when you ask them what they like and what they perceive themselves to be, they like to be characterized as decision makers, people who, especially in the workplace, people who make decisions, get things done. They are cautiously optimistic. Now, I think prior to the economic downturn, they may have been more optimistic, but after the economic downturn, they have more age issues. They have aging parents, so they have more debt exposure there. They may have millennials living with them, so-called basement millennials. So they feel a little financially underwater, and they still probably have that in the back of their mind, what happened in the Great Depression from the people who influenced them the most, the greatest generation. Most are not likely to retire at 65. They may not work full-time, but they don't look at work as something that ends. They look at work as something that may need to continue, both financially but also for their state of mind. They are very adaptive, and they're goal-oriented. They are career-driven, and they're a little bit more self-driven over than being a team player, which is very different from, and what separates them from the greatest generation, where everybody kind of came together. With baby boomers, they're a little bit more self-driven. They have strong values. Community values are very important to them. And then health care. There are issues with boomers with alcoholism, depression, and anxiety. As for technology, they will accept it, and they have accepted it, but they know what life can be without it, and often they look at it and say life was better without technology, and they could do that again, which separates them a lot from the others. So Generation X, okay, so here's the generation before the millennials. They were influenced by the economic downturn of the 1980s. If you recall, there was another recession, and so that really impacted them. They are better educated than boomers, and along with more education, the statistics are they're more likely to change jobs, whereas boomers are more likely to stay in the same job. The Xers, 60%, have attended college. They're very independent and resourceful and self-sufficient. They don't rely so much on their employer and feel like they can go do it on their own. Xers make great entrepreneurs. They value freedom and responsibility. Okay, they want to be able to work the work and do it the way they do it, and they want people to give them that responsibility. But they also believe in life balance and autonomy. And so this is where they separate from the boomers a little bit, where boomers were, work and always work a little bit. Generation Xers introduced the workplace and employers to, let's start thinking about life balance, and let's start thinking that I'm a better employee when I have more balance between my personal life and my working life. They're considered very engaged. They provide a very high quality of work and considered very productive. Now, millennial characteristics. They are the largest employee group. They are the most educated for those that are entering the workforce. No surprise here, they're proficient in technology. They've never known a television set without a remote control. Cable television is something that they've always had. One thing that separates them, where Xers are kind of balanced between work and life, millennials favor personal aspirations over work. And that's where a lot of people turn and say, look, millennials are not great in the workplace because, they're not the type that are going to chip in. And that's kind of that's really not a great characterization of it. It's just that when they look at the work and life balance, they still enjoy work. It's just that they enjoy their personal life a little bit more. They're very team-oriented, as opposed to boomers, which are look and will do things on the self and prefer to do things on their own, and Xers a bit. They like to work in teams, but they do want structure, and so they like a vision and a mission. So those vision and mission statements that everybody kind of works over and ponders every year, that's important for millennials. They love choice. I put the word down here, but they love choice. They like the ability to choose their path. They want clarity. And something that is often confused is that they don't want structure. No, they crave structure. They want rules. They want handbooks. They want to know what it means to succeed. But they also want choice with that, meaning it can't be this or that. They want to know what the gray sides are. And they look at things as shades of gray versus black and white. Very accepting of diversity and differences. And interestingly, looking at this, and another kind of thing that a lot of people misinterpret, quality of work is important. In fact, they will really work hard to do the most quality and to the point that a lot of millennials won't even produce it unless it can be the highest quality. They don't like to compromise on quality. Now, what do boomers seek in employment? So I put this big house in because when boomers were brought up, this was the sign of success, the big house, the big car. And so this is what they seek from employers. They want employers to keep them engaged and involved in the decision-making. Remember, boomers want to make decisions. So they want to be engaged. Where boomers get turned off is when they're left alone and nobody interacts with them. They don't communicate with them. That's when they become that's when they become disengaged with their employer. They do and enjoy mentoring younger workers. We'll talk later, but they don't like to train younger workers to replace them, which we'll speak about. They want to use technology. It's fine, especially online collaboration. They seek appreciation. They want to be told that they're doing a good job, and pretty much everybody does. But boomers really like that. But when it comes to motives and what they want from their employer, from a financial standpoint, other than salary, which everybody wants a bigger salary. There's no generation that says, I'll take less, although some may compromise for this and that. But boomers want retirement security, and that's the big push for boomers. They want health care. They want estate planning. They want debt management, especially after the recent downturn. Boomers near retirement are more than willing to accept part-time and project-based work. What Generation X seeks, okay, so I showed the big picture of the mansion. Generation Xers are happy with, a nice house and a picket fence. They want that work and life balance, okay? They want flex time. Boomers like flex time, but they'll never ask for it in most cases because they think people may look at them wrong, look at them in a bad light if they said, look, I'd rather spend and work at home. But Generation Xers love it, and they'll ask for it. They want flex time to address for child care and aging parents. They like vacation. Okay, this is different from boomers. Okay, boomers often, if you look at boomers, they often don't take their vacation because as taking vacation, they often view that their employer may view that as them being lazy or not wanting to be a team player or leaving other people to do their work. So it creates this point where they feel like maybe I should just skip my vacation or not take it, not to look bad. Not the case with Generation Xers. They want it, and they want more vacation leave, and they prefer paid time off versus having a handbook or policies that say, okay, you can get sick leave and you can get leave to child care leave. They just want it to be paid time off and give a bundle of days, and they get to choose what they use it for, from vacation to sick leave, et cetera. They want independence. They're not as, boomers like to be part of management and want to manage things. It's just not as important to Xers generally, but they want the challenges. They want a laid out career path, but they want the ability to accept it or reject it. A boomer would look at you and say, what? I don't need to go this way if an employer tells them. Generation Xers they say, look, you can go this way, you can go that way. You get to decide, but they want it challenging. They're big into self-improvement, so they love training and education. And right now, because they're not as nearing retirement, pay and bonuses are the most desired. But financial stability is important to them as well. And they're beginning to think about retirement planning and health care and starting to think, these are things I'm going to have to address later. Now, what do millennials seek? And I put in here the tricked out Winnebago where they can travel and go wherever they want. They crave feedback at all times. They love feedback. They want to know how they're helping the organization. They want to know, I am making a difference, me personally, that I'm making a difference. They want the choices. They want to choose the work that they do. And they want multiple choices. They always don't want to do the same thing over and over again. Where a boomer may feel more confident by doing the same job over and over again, to a millennial, that's kind of boring. They want to do different things. They want flexibility in scheduling. It's just as important to them as health insurance and a 401k. That, once again, is to address their need to want to do personal things, their personal aspirations, and be able to do those in a way that they like. They want paid time off. This is a big deal both for Xers and for millennials. And they don't want to have to tell you why they're taking time off. They just want to say, I'm taking off this day. They want to travel abroad. They love to travel. I deal with a lot of people who are Xers and boomers who manage millennials, and they all say the same thing. They take exotic trips. If they have the salary to do it, they'll go to Vietnam. They'll go to Malaysia. They like to travel. A big thing for millennials is student debt. It hangs over many of them. They want employers to think about and help them pay it. And they want their employers, if they're with an employer, to pay for any advanced degrees. Salary is still important to them, but they want health care and retirement. They like it, but it's less of a driver for them. Now let's talk about the risks each one presents in the workplace. First of all, age discrimination. Okay, under the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the federal law and state law equivalents, age discrimination can happen to anyone who is 40 or older. The thing to remember is by 2020, 62% of the job openings will be from boomer retirement. Okay, so when you look at who presents in a broad brush, who presents the greatest age discrimination risk, it's boomers. And you add to that risk that a lot of them have those financial fears. So if they lose their job at 56, at 57, and they still don't have enough for retirement, the statistics are pretty clear that it's more difficult for them to find a job at that age, and therefore if they're not able to find a job, they may often sue. Okay? So there's where your age discrimination risk may come from your boomers and your Xers. You also have disability discrimination risk from both generations, okay? So as you get older, you have more health risks, and so you have a disability discrimination risk under the Americans with Disabilities Act, also the Family Medical Leave Act, and then you have the related issues with workers' compensation. Of course, if somebody's injured on the job, they get workers' compensation. But if they're terminated for being injured on the job, then that turns into workers' comp retaliation. So from our practice, what I often see is these three, if they can be lumped together, they're often lumped together as a cause of action where you have, and even all four, you have somebody who's, let's say, a 58-year-old who gets hurt on the job. Then let's say the employer wants to cut back. They cut back that job. You can see these four causes of action likely in a pleading. One, I was the one selected for the cut because of my age. I was disabled because I was injured on the job. You terminated me because I filed a workers' compensation claim, and I should have been given, and you terminated me while I was on family medical leave. So very, very common when you see, especially when you have layoffs, and it involves older employees. Now, your millennial risk, very different, and it's interesting. Millennials, the risks are from whistleblowing. Whistleblowing, if you're not aware, is a big driver in litigation, employment litigation today. We're seeing more and more cases. The government and lawmakers are basically incorporating whistleblower protection provisions within a lot of the federal statutes. So you get it in the False Claims Act, dealing for medical claims. You see it in laws involving the SEC. You see it from the IRS, OSHA. They all have whistleblower provisions in there. And the whole idea on whistleblowing is that if somebody sees something wrong, then they're protected and they're encouraged to report the wrong to the governing agency that oversees it. And so millennials, based off how they look at things, mission, values, often look at whistleblowing as a duty. Whereas a boomer, and once again, generalizations, because there are plenty of boomers who have blown the whistle, boomers look at it and say, this is my company. This, if I hurt my company, I may hurt my job. If I hurt my job, then I may, hurt my ability to retire. They look at it very different. A millennial looks at it and says, I can probably find another job. I don't want to work for a company that's doing these corrupt acts, and therefore I'm going to blow the whistle. And, the example, the poster child for that is the millennial Edward Snowden. Okay, so millennials and whistleblowing go kind of hand in hand. Data security, that's the other big one. Millennials are tied to technology. I mean, it's just, it's their mobile device is just part of their body. And, to pull it away from them, and all, it's just, it kills them. Okay, so, and in fact, they'll often look at and select employers, if they have a choice, on those that allow them to have their personal devices, the bring your own device policies. But one of the issues that millennials have is they're more likely to intermingle their personal data with their employer data. They just kind of look at it as the same. If you were to ask millennials, they're like, well, I do my emails. It's for me. That's my personal work. They don't look at the emails of the information from their employers as their employer's information. It's their information, too. And so they're more likely to intermingle it. Well, the problem is when they lose that mobile device, they leave it at the airport and somebody picks it up, well, then everybody has the employer's data. They'll select phishing links, okay? People send them links all the time on social media, their friends, they select them, they go to the videos, and they watch the videos. This is how they interact. So if they get a social engineering link that includes phishing from somebody they think they know, they click on it, then, they open themselves up. And they're not big on passwords, unfortunately. They just, why, nobody really knows. Boomers are great on passwords, and so are Xers. But millennials just kind of look at passwords as a bother. Once again, fast access to information. So passwords slow that down. Family Medical Leave Act, once again, this kind of goes to their want to have, and they're having children, so the Family Medical Leave Act applies. And if their spouse is having a child or they want to take care of the child and be a stay-at-home dad or stay-at-home mom, Family Medical Leave Act applies. And then workers' compensation is an exposure as well. And it's exposure for any kind of employee. So what are the takeaways from this? First of all, I would like you to know that wages still rule. So the idea that, okay, I can pay less but give people paid time off, that means I'll get more millennials or retain more of my boomers. That's not exactly the case. Wages are still rule. Everybody wants higher wages. They want bonuses. Boomers and Xers actually feel they need it to deal with debt and, growing issues with aging parents. Millennials want it. They feel like they should get as much as anybody else, especially if they're contributing. Retirement and health care, very important for boomers and Xers. If you're a new employer, let's say you're starting off and you don't have it, you won't attract boomers and Xers as well if you did have it. But millennials may come over if you don't have it. Paid education, not as important for boomers. Boomers, at this point think, well, I kind of know it. I've been doing this for a long time unless it's a new job for them. But Xers and millennials crave it. So paid education, including education for them to better themselves outside of the employer. I can't stress enough about flex time. All the generations like it. What I see from workplaces is that that's where more and more are going. It helps, and the research on it shows that it helps with life balance. Workers of all generations appreciate it, and so flex time is important, as well as working from home, telecommuting. The new cyber workplace is really drawing a lot of people, and that's a big attraction, the ability to work from the home. And Xers love it. Millennials will do it. Boomers will accept it and actually start liking it once they get it. More interactive feedback. So if what you do is you do the you come in and every year you do the evaluation, the personal evaluation of each employee. That's not really going to make it for millennials or Xers. They like more interactive feedback, so more feedback is welcomed, and they want it. The big thing, and I think a big challenge for a lot of employers is millennials and Xers really like career paths. They like to be able to say, hey, I want to go down this way. Boomers, we didn't get that. So, you went in, if I went into a law firm as a boomer, you go in and they say, okay, you're going to do civil rights law. And that's what you did. And then you kept doing civil rights law. For a millennial and an Xer, my brother works for a large law firm too. And he goes in and he says, the millennials, one day want to, do healthcare law, and the next day, I think I want to look over at patents and see if I can do some of that. So they like that, but for a lot of employers, that's hard to provide that flexibility, but that's what more and more people are appreciating. Allow for smart devices, okay? I tell people, I know you've got a lot of data security issues. I know that there's a productivity issue with smart devices. But if you want to attract innovative people, then you're going to have to allow it because they expect it. It's just part of it. And so you have to learn, and I hate to use the word control, but you have to learn to manage it so that it's done safely with security and make sure that you show people how it can be unproductive. Remember this, the Xers and the millennials are the ones that love training. So they'll appreciate the training about how smart devices do not make them productive. I tell every employer, go to PTO, paid time off. Don't, do a policy for jury duty, and don't do a policy for, vacation, and don't do a policy for sick leave. And for heaven's sake, don't require a doctor's note for, sick leave. I know a lot of people do that. It's a real turnoff for millennials requiring doctor's notes because they expect their employer to trust them. But so just give them a paid time off. They don't want to give you a reason. They just want to be able to follow the rules and say, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be taking Wednesday off. And from an exposure standpoint, that's better too. The less you know about health and things of that nature, the less chance you have somebody say, I was terminated because, they found out I had cancer and I had to do cancer treatments. If that can be kept to themselves and you don't know about it, that helps you in your exposure too. So I tell people, go to paid time off, and it's easier to administrate too. It allows you less time tracking down people. More training. Everybody wants it. Boomers even like it. Xers want it. Millennials crave it. So you want to do more training. More project-based work. Okay, this is really important. Boomers don't really like it as much. They want to know and have the security, I'm going to be doing the same thing over and over again. But millennials prefer it. They like project-based work, and they want it because it gives them to go from one project to another and allows them to work with different people. One thing I always tell is keep boomers managing things. First of all, they like it, and the others don't really care as much. Yeah, they do, and they like the idea of being in management, but boomers really strive for it. So if you can keep them managing things, managing projects, that's good. For your boomers who are nearing retiring, think about transitioning them to mentoring. It keeps them in the game, allows them to shape the next generation, allows them to maybe flow over into part-time, maybe then flow into project work, which they need and they want because, remember, they've got all those financial obligations and everything got thrown out of whack with the last downturn. Allow for open reporting. What we mean by that is allow employees to report wrongdoing without any fear of reprisal. Millennials love this. If you say to them, look, if you got to report wrongdoing, you got to go to your manager and tell them, they're going to be a little concerned about that. But if you say, look, we want to know about wrongdoing, we're the type of organization that wants to prevent it at all times, here's a means for you to report it to this person and this person and this person. If that doesn't work for you, here's an 800 number you can call. Just let us know. That really gives millennials assurance that you have the right values as an organization, and you want to know when there's wrongdoing occurring. And that helps decrease your whistleblowing exposure. And then maintain and follow rules. Every generation likes it. Every time I hear somebody says, oh, we don't have a handbook. Oh, we're just freedom to choose. That kills millennials. Millennials want that structure. They want to know what the rules are. They want to play within the rules. They want everybody to be treated fairly. And so they want rules. Boomers like rules too, not as much, but now they understand you got to have rules, and Xers like it too. So rules are important. Okay, now I'm going to pass it off to Michael Schraer of Chubb. And so, Michael, it's now yours.
Thanks, Jack, and good afternoon and morning, depending on where you are in the country. This is Michael Schraer from Chubb, and very much appreciate you joining us today. So you heard a lot of insight from Jack on the benefits, the challenges, and the opportunities to create, manage, and leverage a well-integrated staff of multi-generational workers. But much of that is focused, and the time he spent talking was on the business side of the house. So while pursuing those business goals of a successful multi-generational workplace, there are also many legal obligations and ramifications that an employer must also attend to. There's both federal and state legislation governing employers' actions, ranging from discrimination, including, as Jack mentioned before, discrimination based on age, to wrongful employment decisions such as hiring, promoting, and terminating individuals, to retaliatory treatment of employees. A primary example of federal legislation would be the ADEA, or Age Discrimination in Employment Act, which Jack mentioned earlier, and that protects workers and applicants age 40 and higher from employment discrimination. Oftentimes, though, the corresponding state legislation on the same topic is more stringent or broad-reaching than the federal requirements, such as when you look at New York State, where their age discrimination legislation uses a threshold of the age of 18 or higher as opposed to the 40-year or higher federal statute. Some of that legislation is dependent upon the size of an employer's staff, and those size thresholds may also differ from state to state, even when compared to the federal legislation. So, for instance, the federal ADEA law applies to companies with 20 or more employees, while looking at the New York statutes around age discrimination, those kick in with companies as few as 4 employees. In all cases, the legislation is constantly evolving and always becoming less employer-friendly. Sometimes an employer runs afoul of such employment laws not because of intentional discrimination, which is commonly called disparate treatment. And an example of that would be a plan where a company chooses to reduce its employee benefits costs by terminating the oldest employees who are using those benefits the most. So in that case, the discrimination was targeted at the oldest employees. But sometimes the discrimination comes about as an adverse effect on a protected class of individuals, which is called disparate impact. An example of that would be a company which is struggling financially and chooses to close its subsidized cafeteria in its home office in an effort to impose expense constraints. But the outcome of that decision is a termination of the entire cooking staff, all of whom were over the age of 55. So in that case, there was not an outright goal to eliminate older workers, but that was the outcrop or the ultimate impact of that decision. Lastly, a fair portion of employment litigation may be due to alleged wrongdoing by the employer, and significant amounts of defense costs can be incurred by an employer to successfully defend itself to prove that no actual wrongdoing occurred in that workplace. The next slide, please, Jack, if you would. Jack talked about how each generation acts, thinks, and what's driving its members. But those are generalizations, as he mentioned frequently, and that can become dangerous in the workplace. It's not uncommon for people to have perceptions, biases, prejudgments, and mischaracterizations of other individuals based upon their age. That could be whether that individual is old or young. Statements in the workplace like, "We want young, energetic, and dynamic people," can be interpreted as, "Let's get rid of the old people." Similarly, a comment to an older employee that "we didn't think you could or would want to adapt to technology" can be indicative of an intent to discriminate against an older worker. Conversely, background checks on applicants, which have become quite common, may focus or can focus on financial or credit scores, which could be disproportionately impactful on younger applicants who have yet to solidify their personal financial situation and thus be discriminatory towards younger workers. Separately, and generally speaking, companies do have a right to enforce a social media policy aimed at protecting the company from having its employees making damaging or negative statements about the company in public. However, having an overly tight or overly restrictive social media policy, while it is intended to protect the company from damaging publicity, might run afoul of laws which are meant to protect employees' rights to partake in protected activity, also called concerted activities, such as critically discussing what they deem to be a negative workplace environment or workplace policies with other employees. And they commonly will be doing that in today's day and age on social media rather than in years past where they might have done that around the work cooler or the water cooler. As Jack noted, the highly communicative and openly sharing nature of millennials might make them more likely to be put into the spotlight on this type of issue and thus make them more susceptible to being retaliated against by an unhappy employer. Other types of retaliatory treatment by an employer against its employees could be termination as a result of filing workers' comp claims, possibly be more likely and more common in older employees who are more likely to be injured on the job, or, as Jack mentioned, whistleblowing by an employee to outside authorities. And obviously this tends to be an exposure that might be more common in younger employees. So with the broadening of legislation in the areas of workplace disabilities over the past few years, many employees, both old and young, may have some kind of qualifying disability. But certainly, again, the impact of aging on older workforce may create a greater likelihood of disabilities for those individuals, and therefore a greater need to be reasonably accommodated by their individual employers, or else they may be subject to disability discrimination. Next slide, Jack, please. So beyond prudent behavior, education, training, strong policies, and procedures, what else can you do as an employer? You certainly can consider buying employment practices liability insurance, which may be commonly referred to as EPL or EPLI insurance, from a leading and well-respected insurance company. You cannot protect or prevent employment-related litigation, and EPL insurance covers both court-awarded damages and settlements, as well as, just importantly, defense costs. Commonly, there's coverage for both actual and alleged wrongful employment acts, and coverage is not for all employment acts, but generally will apply to, on a broad basis, discrimination, harassment, which is going to include both sexual harassment, bullying, and hostile work environments, breach of contract, retaliation, wrongful employment decisions around hiring, firing, and promotions, and related workplace torts such as libel, slander, and invasion of privacy. If you select a market-leading insurer, you will also likely gain access to a broad panel of top-notch defense firms, which, due to their relationships with the insurance company, can provide service at a very competitive rate, often well below the levels you would be able to negotiate with those firms on a direct basis. You also get to partner with that insurance company's claims staff, who can bring you insight, experience, expertise, and guidance based upon the handling of thousands of claims, compared to the relatively few or no claims your company has experienced. The combination of a quality defense counsel and insurance company claims staff can add an additional level of objectivity to the claims evaluation process, highly valuable in light of the emotional and highly personal nature of most employment-related litigation, and especially helpful when determining the best course of action towards settlement or continued litigation. Finally, better insurers offer a suite of loss prevention tools and resources ranging from interactive websites, toll-free hotlines to leading employment lawyers for triage types of situations, and more. All these provide value for your insurance premiums, even in a policy period where you have no claims. So with that, Jack and I have concluded our prepared remarks, and now I'm going to flip things back over to Bill, who's going to take over for the Q&A section of our webcast. Bill?
Michael and Jack, excellent job. Very, very interesting content. I took a lot of notes. I hope our listeners did as well. We have a few questions for you. For Jack, what risk exposure exists if boomers train millennials?
Well, there's not a per se risk exposure. It's not against the law to have a boomer train a millennial, obviously. And with all that experience boomers have, that's who you want to train. But where it becomes problematic and very hard to defend is when a boomer trains a millennial. Let's say the boomer's 55 and trains a millennial, let's say 28, 29. The boomer has all the experience, has gained all this experience, trains the millennial, and then unexpected to the boomer, not part of the plan, according to thought, as the boomer thought, they get terminated or laid off, and then the person who they trained takes over. That does not play well in front of juries. And remember, when we're looking at jury science, every jurors vote and decide based off their own personal experience. So every juror is going to get old. They're going to get over 40, they hope to. And every juror has somebody they know and love that's over the age of 40. And they know what it means to be laid off, and they can put themselves in a situation. A good trial attorney will do that and say, look, put yourself in this person's situation. They're 50, 55, 56. They've been laid off. They trained their replacement, and the indignity of this of 15 years of service, it just does not play well. So that's the big exposure. That's what we hope a lot of people avoid at all costs. If you're going to have to train somebody, have a boomer train, an extra train, a millennial, then make them part of the plan, let them understand what's going on. If you make a promise, keep it.
Excellent. Thank you. How is the government adjusted to millennials and their view of the workplace, Jack?
If you were to put the government, especially the federal government, in a generation, they would be in the silent generation, which was 1923 to 1944. Most of the workplace laws that were created, especially when it regards labor. So the Department of Labor were created during the Depression, so 1935. You see that with our wage and hour laws. You see that with the issues with Uber. So Uber's a perfect example of a kind of a company that focused on millennials. It's a perfect millennial model. You drive when you want to drive. You drive your own car. You set your own hours. We pay you well, and then you use this money to do what you want to do. Okay? Well, as you have seen in certain jurisdictions, they're saying, well, hold on. They're not independent contractors. These millennials are truly employees. Well, if you were to ask many of those millennials, they'd say, no. If I was going to be an employee, I wouldn't have done this because I like being an independent contractor. That shows you the conflict of where the government is. The government wants everybody to be an employee. They want everybody to work the 40-hour work week. They want everybody to go 9 to 5. They want everybody to get overtime. They'd like everybody to kind of do the same job, and that's a very kind of a boomer mentality, and it really doesn't fit with how millennials look at the workplace or how employers have to compete. So I don't think they've adjusted as well as they need to, and hopefully somebody will look at this at some time.
Excellent. For Michael, Michael, what is EPL insurance, and what type of allegations and EPL claims tend to be the most problematic for employers to defend against, and why?
Sure, Bill. So again, EPL insurance, I touched on it a little bit earlier in the presentation, but again, it's going to be insurance that protects the organization, the employer, as well as all of the employees who work there from suits brought by employees, whether they're current or prospective employees or applicants, as well as independent contractors and volunteers, where those employees or applicants or independent contractors or volunteers are bringing claims, again, predominantly for issues around discriminatory treatment by the employer, for breaching an employment contract, for a workplace, hostile workplace environment, for retaliatory treatment. So it's a liability insurance. It is separate and distinct from, and I'm not sure where the question came, but separate and distinct from general liability insurance, which doesn't deal with employment-related matters. It is separate and distinct from workers' compensation, which, while that covers claims brought by employees, those are for more of the bodily injuries that are occurring on the workplace. This is more for the negligent type of acts that an employer might commit against its employees, applicants, or volunteers. So I'm happy to give some more detail if there's some more detail behind that question, but if not, I can move on also to address the second half of your question. I'd sort of say the two, does that hit it, Bill, you think?
Yeah, please go right ahead, yes.
Sure. And then, as far as the more problematic, claims and litigation to deal with as an employer, I think there's kind of two of them, two types, I guess I'd say. The disability discrimination, I think, is challenging because, as I said, there's a growingly expansive group of employees, young and old, everybody who have some kind of disability. Some of them are very visible, and some may not be. They may be actually a disease or something like that, or recovering from a disease, may even be a disability. So the idea that there's such an expansive group of employees who may be disabled, and then the necessity to engage in an interactive discussion with those employees about how to reasonably accommodate those disabilities. If you haven't, as an employer, done those activities, identified the disability, and done everything reasonably possible to accommodate it, it becomes a very difficult claim to defend because that's sort of a, he's kind of starting off on quicksand right there. And then the retaliation claims, which are the fastest growing and most frequent type of allegation in employment matters. And as Jack mentioned, it may be a retaliation allegation in addition to other types of allegations, very subjective, very difficult to deal with. And ultimately, if you have a scenario where the retaliation is being alleged along with discrimination, the employer may be able to prove that they did not discriminate against the employee who brought the claim, but then their retaliatory treatment of that employee is much more difficult to get dismissed. And so we see those claims not being dismissed quickly, defense costs piling up, and ultimately the longer any claim and litigation goes on between an employee and employer, the more likely it's going to be costly to settle in the end. So again, I'd say sort of the disability and the retaliation claims.
We had one question, Mike, if you could just briefly go over what an EPL policy covers once again.
Sure. Again, I'll just kind of go through it quickly, but it's going to cover violations of discrimination laws. So, right, discrimination based upon race, creed, color, sex, military status, any kind of protected status under any federal, state, or local statutes. It's going to deal with harassment that might include sexual harassment, that may include bullying, or it may include just a hostile work environment. So in other words, nothing directed specifically at an employee, but an actual hostile work environment. It tends to respond to breaches of contract, breaches of employment contract. Deals with, as we talked about before, the retaliation actions of an employer against its employees. So Jack gave an example before. An employee files a workers' comp claim, and 2 days later is terminated in retaliation for filing the work comp claim, because now, of course, the workers' comp insurance is going to be more expensive because there's more claims. And then it deals with a lot of employment decisions that might deal with wrongful hiring, firing, promotion. So it doesn't have to be only because of discriminatory reasons. It could be that you didn't give me a fair opportunity to interview for this job, not because I was old or because I was African American or because I was female. It just you didn't give me the opportunity. So hiring, firing, and promotion issues, and as I said, finally workplace torts, so things like libel, slander, invasion of privacy, misrepresentation of a job opportunity. Sometimes you even get into failure to adopt policies or failure to consistently enforce corporate policies. All of those things may wind up triggering an EPL policy. And then again, as I said, the EPL policy will cover the defense costs to defend that claim, whether the allegations are actual or just alleged, and then to the extent that there would be any settlements or damages owed to the claimant, it would respond to those as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, good job. I think we got it that time. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Is it potentially illegal to not hire a person who the employer perceives would require time to worship during the workday? Ooh, that's a sticky one. Who wants to handle that one?
Is it potentially? Yeah, that would be religious discrimination. So that would fall under Title VII. So if you're looking at not hiring someone because they may, just based off their appearance, let's say that you look at them and you think, well, okay, they're Muslim, so they're going to need time for prayer, and you don't hire them because of that, that would fall smack dab under the protections under Title VII and pretty much all state laws.
Is it if there's another reason why they're not a cultural fit, is it still potentially religious discrimination?
Yeah, it's not religious. If it's a cultural issue, then it falls into the other basket, which is national origin discrimination. So it's illegal to terminate somebody from their place of origin, their country of origin. If they're a native of, let's say, India, and you say, this isn't a great fit because he's Indian, and I've got Pakistanis, and I don't think it'll be a good fit. If that's your reason, then that would be considered, potentially considered to be discrimination based off national origin.
Excellent. Okay. We have one more. Some employees want to switch to contractor or 1099 status, and this may provide more flexibility to both employer and worker. However, it creates risks that the government will disagree with whether the person is a contractor or an employee. How to manage this issue?
Yeah, so, that's another 2 hours.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, so, here's the broad answer. The government wants everybody to be employees. That's what they want. Why do they want that? They want that because they get more employment taxes. And there are more controls over employees than there are of contractors. The rub is that more and more employees want to be contractors. They want to be able to go take a month off for sabbatical before being told they can take off a month for sabbatical. They want to be able to work when they want to work. They want to work at night. Let's say they're a night out. We're being overflowed by employees who are saying, this is what I want to be happy, and when I'm happy, I work well. And employers are starting to recognize if the employee's happy, they work well. And a lot of that's more independence from the employer. But the government is really behind on that, and they'll mask it and say, we're doing this because of employee protections. And for some employees, they are. There's no doubt about it that there are some employers who hire people who should be employees, name them independent contractors for the sole purpose of not having to pay benefits, et cetera, et cetera. But there is this growing surge. I mentioned Uber. I mentioned other groups that are coming in there saying, look, we like contractors. They want to be contractors. Let's use them. My best advice to you is you have to break it down by employee. There's a several point test, more than 10 factors you have to look at, and you have to have an attorney walk with you and just make that call. But the presumption, always the presumption, is that person's an employee if they're doing work for you. Unless they are truly independent. They have their own corporation. They use their own tools. They set their own hours. They set their own times. You don't overlook their work. There's just many factors.
Terrific. Thanks very much. We have time for one more question, and that is, how do we protect ourselves from accusations of discrimination or retaliation where deficiencies in performance based upon age and health are involved?
Do you want me to jump in a little bit, Jack?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I think whether it's for that issue or anything else, I think the documentation of performance-based issues and the documentation of the inability to fulfill the job obligations, the core obligations, even after potentially reasonable accommodations might be made, and the timing of that, meaning giving a reasonable amount of time for the individual to cure any of these deficiencies or remedies, or even be given support and development to overcome those. I think those are the types of, steps that could mitigate the outcome that ultimately, if a termination has to come to be, the employer could set forth and use those as defenses to say, look at the reasonableness and the extent to which I went through and the transparency I had with my employee in trying to get to a good place, but ultimately you didn't get there. So I don't, Jack, maybe you want to add something, but to me, those are sort of the higher level issues that we see that make, things more successful.
Yeah, so the interactive process, which you just described perfectly, is good. But when it deals with health and age, it's really something you can't ever say, he's not going to get the promotion because of his age. That's per se discrimination. Or she's not going to get the promotion, or I'm not going to hire her because she has cancer. That's per se, or I believe she has cancer, which is a perception, which is per se discrimination. What I tell people is get job descriptions. The job description should say what it takes to do a job. It's not just the title, it's not the duties, but it's the physical and mental requirements to do this job well. And if you have job descriptions and somebody's not able to meet those duties and they're not able to meet the requirements, the physical and mental requirements of the job, then you're in a really good place to start the interactive process to say, look, we're requiring you to work and be able to lift 50 pounds. You're not able to do that anymore. That's part of your job description. The other part of the interactive process is you got to bring in a third party, especially when you're dealing with conditions and disability, and that third party is the patient, is the employee's doctor, and if you need to, then a third party doctor that comes in and evaluates the employee and says, can they continue to do their job? The moment you step in as a doctor, that's when you're going to see a lawsuit.
Michael Schraer and Jack McCalmon, thank you so much for a fantastic and well-presented webinar.
Thank you for having us.
Okay.
We appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, and hope everybody has a great afternoon and a great weekend.
Thank you so much. Listeners, there are a couple of upcoming webinars I want to bring to your attention. 5 Steps to a Profitable Business on Friday, September 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And Leverage Doesn't Have to Be a Dirty Word on Friday, October 7th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Register for those webinars at the Vistage Worldwide website. Look for slides on this webinar to be up on the Vistage Worldwide website next week. This is Bill Black for Vistage Worldwide, wishing you continued success. This concludes the webinar.